I'm standing in ankle-deep water, staring at the ruins of the one thing that kept me breathing after my wife died. Splintered teak floats past my boots, fragments of fiberglass bump gently against the dock like they don't realize they're debris now. Oil spreads across the surface in thin rainbow streaks, shimmering in the morning sun. 3 years. 3 years of weekends, late nights, and quiet grief poured into that sailboat, and the HOA destroyed it. Not a storm, not an accident, not some unavoidable tragedy. The HOA president ordered it demolished. Her name is Melissa Crow. She called my boat an eyesore, said it hurt property values, said it didn't fit the aesthetic vision of the neighborhood. So while I was out of town, she sent a demolition crew to my dock and erased $40,000 worth of work like it was trash. She's standing on her balcony now, coffee mug in hand, watching the water like she just finished a productive morning. Then she smiles at me. "Well," she calls out, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "feeling better now, Ethan?" I turn toward her slowly. She's waiting for something. Anger, tears, maybe a breakdown. That's what people like her expect when they think they've won. Instead, I smile back. "Yeah," I say calmly, "I'm doing great, Melissa." Her smile falters. That's because she doesn't know what I found 3 weeks ago, and she definitely doesn't know that destroying my boat was the worst mistake of her life. Before we go any further, quick question for you watching this. What would you do if your HOA destroyed your property? Fight back immediately or let them think they won first? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy HOA stories where bullies finally get what's coming, hit like and subscribe, because this one only gets better from here. Let me take you back 3 weeks earlier. I'm sitting in my late Uncle Raymond Hale's study, surrounded by dust, salt-stained papers, and the smell of old books. He left me the house and the dock when he passed, a modest waterfront place in Seabrook Point, the same harbor he worked for 40 years. The lawyer asked me to sort through his documents before probate closed. Boat registrations, dock permits, maintenance logs. Then I find a thick manila folder tucked behind a filing cabinet. Written on the tab in my uncle's shaky handwriting, Seabrook Marina Holdings. That gets my attention. Inside are incorporation papers dated 1964, stock certificates, property diagrams, and a handwritten letter addressed to me. Ethan, if you're reading this, someone is probably trying to tell you what you can't do with your boat. Thought you should know you own most of the water they're standing on. Use it wisely. My hands start shaking. I keep reading. Turns out, my uncle didn't just own a dock, he owned 67% of Seabrook Marina Holdings, a dormant but legally active marina corporation that controlled the water rights extending 200 feet from shore. That meant something huge. Every waterfront homeowner, including Melissa Crow, owned land access only. The water itself, that belonged to the marina. That belonged to me. I sit back in his chair, heart pounding. For 3 years, Melissa had been issuing fines, threats, and violations against boat owners, claiming the HOA had authority over the harbor. She never did, not once. Every ticket, every fine, every demand, illegal. But instead of confronting her immediately, I made a different choice. I decided to wait, because people like Melissa Crow never stop when they think they're powerful. They escalate. I'd watched her pattern for years. First it was old Cal Russo told to remove his fishing nets because they looked unsightly. Then the Donovan family forced to relocate their lobster traps. Then me. She always targeted people she thought couldn't fight back. So I started documenting everything. Every email, every notice, every conversation. I spoke to other boat owners quietly. They all had stories. Threats, intimidation, selective enforcement. One fisherman told me she tried to find him for improper rope coloration. Another said she threatened to revoke dock access unless he upgraded his boat to match community standards. That's not HOA governance, that's abuse. My maritime attorney confirmed what the documents already proved. HOAs have zero authority over navigable waterways. Marina corporations override them entirely. But timing matters. Expose someone like Melissa too early and they retreat quietly. Expose them after they commit a crime, and they destroy themselves. So when she sent me a final notice warning that enforcement action was coming, I let it happen. 2 days later, she showed up at my dock with a clipboard and her cousin Trent, introduced as a marine compliance consultant. Trent was wearing golf cleats, actual golf cleats on my deck, metal spikes scraping fiberglass. I nearly said something but stopped myself. Let him keep going. He tugged on my rigging like it was playground equipment, setting off bells and wind chimes up and down the dock. "Structurally questionable," he announced. Melissa beamed. 2 days after that, the fines began, $150 a day. Then came the threats, then came the rumors, and finally, the demolition. Back in the present, as Melissa finishes her coffee and turns to go inside, she thinks this is over. She thinks she won. What she doesn't know is that she just destroyed a seaworthy vessel on water she doesn't own, without permits, without authority, in violation of state maritime law and environmental protection statutes, with witnesses, with documentation, with contractors who never checked jurisdiction. I pull out my phone and start taking pictures, every plank, every oil slick, every floating memory. This isn't the end. This is the evidence. Melissa Crow is about to learn what happens when fake authority collides with real law. Because once the state gets involved, there's no HOA fine that can save her. The first phone call comes in, and it's not from a lawyer. It's from the county assessor. And what they uncover about Melissa's property sends shockwaves through the entire harbor. She thought she controlled the water. Turns out she never owned a single drop. I hadn't even finished photographing the wreckage when my phone rang. Not a lawyer, not the police, not insurance. A number from the county assessor's office. I answered with wet boots, shaking hands, and fiberglass dust still floating around me. "Mr. Hale," a calm female voice said, "this is Diane Mercer with Seabrook County Property Assessment. We've been reviewing marina-related filings connected to your inquiry last month." My stomach tightened. "Yes," I said carefully. "There are some irregularities tied to the Crow property, specifically regarding claimed water usage, tax classifications, and shoreline structures." I looked up. Melissa Crow was back on her balcony, phone pressed to her ear now, pacing. "Can you come in today?" Diane asked. "This is time-sensitive." I smiled for the first time since my boat was destroyed. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. The county building smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee. Diane led me into a small conference room where 2 other people waited, an assistant assessor and a man in a gray jacket who introduced himself as Lucas Grant, Environmental Compliance. That caught my attention. Diane slid a folder across the table. "Based on the Marina Corporation documents you submitted, we cross-referenced waterfront tax claims for the last 5 years. She tapped one page. "Melissa Crow has been paying residential waterfront access taxes for water she doesn't legally own." Lucas leaned forward. "And that's not the worst part." He flipped the page. "Her decorative dock expansion? Unpermitted. Her oversized boat lift? Never approved. The landscaped runoff system draining into the harbor? Illegal. All of it sits on marina-controlled water, which means none of it falls under HOA authority." I exhaled slowly. "How bad is it?" I asked. Lucas didn't sugarcoat it. "If confirmed on site, she's facing environmental fines, back taxes, and mandatory remediation, possibly more." Diane looked at me. "We'll be conducting an inspection within the week." I stood up. She won't see it coming. Back at the harbor, the news was spreading fast. By noon, 3 different fishermen had stopped by my dock. "You hear they're looking at Melissa's place?" one whispered. "About time," another muttered. I didn't say much, I just listened, because while the county was moving, Melissa was spiraling. She showed up at my dock that afternoon, unannounced. Sunglasses, clipboard, fake confidence. "Ethan," she said sharply, "we need to talk." I crossed my arms. "About what?" "This stunt you're pulling with the county. You think you can intimidate me with paperwork?" I gestured toward the floating debris. "You demolished my boat. It was an emergency safety action. You should be thanking me." "For what? For preventing an accident?" I leaned in just enough to lower my voice. "You destroyed a seaworthy vessel on water you don't own." Her jaw tightened. "You don't know that." I smiled. "Neither did the demolition crew." She left without another word. That's when I knew she was scared. 2 days later, she escalated. A licensed marine surveyor showed up at my dock early in the morning. "I'm sorry about this," he said quietly. "Mrs. Crow requested a safety inspection." I let him board. He checked everything: rigging, cleats, hull integrity. 3 hours later, he handed me his report. "Your boat was in excellent condition, better than most in this harbor." Melissa arrived just in time to snatch the clipboard from his hands. "What about the loose cleat?" she demanded. He sighed. "It was a minor maintenance note, not a hazard." She stormed off. The next morning, she called the harbor master, then the Coast Guard, then Environmental Services about me. Every agency told her the same thing: they had no jurisdiction. She was running out of rope. While she flailed, I worked quietly. I walked the perimeter of her property with my phone, photographed everything: the illegal runoff channel, the reinforced dock pylons, the rusting electrical conduit dipping into the water. Then I sent it all to Lucas. His response came an hour later. "This confirms multiple violations. Inspection will proceed." The inspection happened during a storm: cold rain, heavy wind. Lucas arrived with 2 officers and a clipboard thick enough to qualify as a weapon. Melissa followed them around screaming, "You can't be here! This is HOA-controlled property!" Lucas didn't even look at her. "This inspection is being conducted under state environmental authority." By the end of it, she was pale. "Mrs. Crow," Lucas said calmly, "you're facing fines up to $50,000 pending remediation." Her voice cracked. "This is harassment." "No," he replied, "this is enforcement." That night, the local paper ran the headline, "HOA President Under Investigation After Waterfront Dispute." My phone didn't stop buzzing. Boat owners, neighbors, people who'd been silent for years. They all had stories: threats, fines, intimidation, and they were ready to talk. Melissa tried to save herself. She called an emergency HOA meeting, tried to rally support, but the room turned on her. "Do we even have authority over the water?" someone asked. She didn't answer, because she couldn't. Then she made her biggest mistake yet. She hired a demolition company again, this time for emergency compliance work on my dock. They showed up at dawn. Pete Russo, one of the fishermen, called me immediately. "They're here," he said, "with equipment." I didn't panic. I drove. By the time I arrived, police were already there. The demolition crew had no permits, no authorization, and a signed contract with Melissa Crow, personally. The officer looked at me. "You want to file a report?" I nodded. "Yes, destruction of property." Melissa screamed, "You can't do this!" The officer didn't flinch. "You already did." By nightfall, she was finished, but she didn't know it yet, because the final blow hadn't landed, not until the marina records went public. The truth about who actually owns this harbor is about to surface, the kind of truth that ends careers, destroys reputations, and turns fake authority into criminal liability. I call a public meeting that Melissa thinks is her chance to regain control. Instead, I reveal documents that prove she never had power in the first place. And when the room realizes who truly owns the water, everything changes. Melissa Crow thought the emergency meeting was her lifeline. I could see it in the way she walked into the community center, shoulders back, chin high, clutching a leather folder like it was armor. She wore the same blazer she always saved for HOA hearings, the one meant to say authority without saying a word. She had no idea she was walking into her own autopsy. The room was packed. Not just the usual HOA loyalists either. Fishermen, dock workers, retired couples who'd lived here longer than Melissa had been alive. Even a local reporter lingered near the back, pretending to scroll through his phone. Melissa took her seat in the front row and smiled when she saw me standing near the podium. A tight smile, the kind people wear when they think they're about to watch someone beg. I waited until the room settled. Then I began. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "I called this meeting to clear up confusion about waterfront authority in Seabrook Point." Melissa nodded smugly. She thought I was finally surrendering. "I know emotions are high after the recent incident with my boat, but what I'm about to share isn't about feelings, it's about facts." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder, my uncle's folder, the one Melissa never knew existed. 3 weeks ago, I found something in my Uncle Raymond Hale estate papers that changed everything. I held up the incorporation documents. "These papers establish Seabrook Marina Holdings, formed in 1964 and never dissolved." Murmurs rippled through the room. Melissa's smile froze. "I'm the majority owner," I said calmly. 67%. Silence. You could hear the air conditioning hum. That means the marina, including dock access and water usage up to 200 feet from shore, has never been under HOA control. Melissa stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly across the floor. "That's absurd," she snapped. "You can't just claim ownership now." I didn't raise my voice. "I didn't claim it now. My uncle did 60 years ago." I laid out the maps, property lines, water boundaries, recorded filings. "These documents have been verified by the county and state." The reporter's head snapped up. Melissa looked around, searching for support. She didn't find it. For the past 3 years, Melissa Crow has issued fines, enforced regulations, and ordered demolition work on water the HOA never had authority over. Someone in the back whispered, "Is that true?" Another voice followed, "Then all those fines—" "Invalid," I said. Melissa's face went white. One of the older fishermen stood up. "You mean when you threatened to fine me for my nets?" "Illegal," I said. Another resident spoke up. "She tried to force us to upgrade our dock lights." "Also illegal." Melissa slammed her folder shut. "This is a setup," she yelled. "You're manipulating everyone." I turned toward her. "You ordered a demolition on water you don't own. That's not manipulation. That's criminal." Gasps filled the room. Melissa's husband, Greg Crow, finally spoke. "Melissa, what is he talking about?" She didn't answer him, because she couldn't. The county assessor stepped forward. "Based on these filings, we're reopening all waterfront tax assessments." Melissa's head snapped up. "What?" Diane didn't blink. "You've been claiming taxable access to water you don't own. That affects your assessment." Lucas Grant stepped up beside her. "And your environmental violations occurred on marina-controlled water." The room erupted. People stood, shouting questions. Melissa tried to speak over them. "You're all being fooled." But the crowd wasn't listening anymore. They were doing the math. 3 years of fines, 3 years of threats, 3 years of control based on nothing. I raised my hand. "One more thing." The room quieted. "According to marina records, all waterfront homeowners owe lease fees for water usage. Those fees haven't been collected since my uncle passed." I looked directly at Melissa. "Your property alone owes $31,000. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the back of a chair. "You can't do this," she whispered. "You'll destroy property values." I shook my head. "I'm restoring lawful order." The meeting ended in chaos. But it wasn't chaos for me. It was clarity. The next morning, my phone exploded. 8 waterfront homeowners wanted meetings. They wanted lease agreements. They wanted peace. Melissa? She went silent. Too silent. That afternoon, I got the call. "Ethan," Pete Russo said, "you need to come down here." My chest tightened. "What is it?" "She's here, with contractors." I drove like my heart was on fire. By the time I reached the marina, it was already happening. Heavy machinery, chainsaws. Melissa was tearing apart her own dock. No permits, no containment, debris falling straight into the water. "She's trying to remove evidence," Lucas said when he arrived minutes later. Environmental officers documented everything. Melissa screamed at them. "You don't have the right." Lucas didn't even look at her. "You lost that argument weeks ago." Then the sheriff arrived, then state officials. Melissa's meltdown was public, messy, uncontrolled. The reporter from the meeting filmed everything. That night, the headline read, "HOA president under investigation after illegal waterfront demolition." Melissa's world was collapsing fast. But she wasn't done yet, because people like her never go quietly. And in part 4, she makes one final desperate move, one that turns this from a civil dispute into a criminal case, the kind that ends in handcuffs. Melissa tries to bribe her way out. She targets the wrong official, and the recording she doesn't know exists seals her fate. She thought money could fix everything. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Melissa Crow didn't disappear after the meeting. She imploded. At first, it was quiet, too quiet. No emails, no notices taped to doors, no surprise inspections. The kind of silence that feels less like surrender and more like someone loading a weapon in the dark. I knew that type well. Desperation doesn't calm people like Melissa. It sharpens them. 3 days after the meeting, the rumors started. She's hired a high-powered attorney from Boston. She's forming a waterfront owners defense group. She says you forged those marina documents. Then came the personal attacks. Someone forwarded me a neighborhood email Melissa had sent late at night. "We need to address Ethan Hale's mental instability following his wife's passing. Grief can cloud judgment, and we cannot allow emotional manipulation to destroy our property investments." I stared at the screen, stunned. That was her move? Attack my sanity? Within hours, neighbors started calling me, not angry, but alarmed. "She asked me to sign a petition about you," one woman said. "I told her no." Another whispered, "She said veterans shouldn't be trusted with authority." That one hit hard. But Melissa didn't know something important. Every email, every message, every rumor was being saved. Because when someone shifts from legal threats to character assassination, they're not trying to win anymore. They're trying to survive. The call came on a Thursday morning. "Mark, Ethan, I need to talk to you, privately." Mark was a straight shooter, 30 years in maritime enforcement, the kind of man who still believed rules existed for a reason. We met in his office overlooking the harbor. He shut the door. "She came to see me yesterday," he said. My stomach tightened. "What did she want?" Mark leaned back. "She said there were irregularities with your marina documents, that I should take a closer look." I exhaled slowly. "And?" She slid an envelope across my desk. The room went silent. My jaw clenched. "You tried to bribe you." Mark nodded. "Not subtle, either." He opened a drawer and pulled out a small digital recorder. "She didn't know this was running." My heart started pounding. "She said she'd make it worth my while if I could delay inspections or question your authority." He met my eyes. "I told her that sounded like bribery of a public official." "And she?" Mark pressed play. Melissa's voice filled the room. "Don't be dramatic, Mark. This is just business. That marina nonsense needs to disappear before it destroys everything. I'm offering a consulting fee, off the books, you understand. We can make this go away." I felt cold. The recording clicked off. Mark didn't smile. "I turned this over to the state. They looped in federal investigators." My breath caught. "Federal?" "She crossed jurisdictions," he said flatly. "Environmental enforcement, public corruption, conspiracy." He stood. "She didn't just destroy your boat, Ethan. She destroyed herself." By Friday morning, everything accelerated. Melissa's Boston attorney withdrew from her case. No explanation, just gone. Her waterfront defense group dissolved overnight when members realized she'd lied to them. And then the real blow landed. The FBI opened an investigation. I didn't hear it from the news. I heard it from Greg Crow. He showed up at my dock unannounced. He looked broken. "Ethan," he said quietly, "I didn't know." I crossed my arms. "You stood by her." "I trusted her," he whispered. "Now my business is being audited. Insurance regulators, state investigators. They're saying we overcharged waterfront policies for years." I said nothing, because I didn't need to. Melissa had built an empire on fake authority, and fake authority always leaves a paper trail. The arrest warrant came faster than anyone expected. Monday morning, 6:30 a.m., 2 unmarked vehicles pulled up to the Crow residence. I didn't see it firsthand, but the footage spread fast. Melissa screaming, her neighbors watching from behind curtains, agents escorting her down the steps in handcuffs. Charges read like a checklist of karma: attempted bribery of a public official, environmental violations, conspiracy to obstruct enforcement, destruction of property. She was released on bail by evening, but she wasn't done, not even close. Saturday was Harbor Festival Day, a yearly tradition. Food trucks, music, kids learning to sail, the whole community packed along the waterfront. I'd scheduled official marina inspections to coincide with the event. Visibility matters. Accountability matters more. Melissa showed up just after noon, disheveled, furious, clutching legal papers like a shield. She pushed through the crowd towards the inspection area where engineers and environmental officers were documenting violations. "This is harassment," she screamed. "You're all persecuting me." People stared. Parents pulled kids closer. Cameras turned. She saw me near the dock and charged. "You did this," she shrieked. "You forged documents. You manipulated everyone." An agent stepped between us. "Ma'am, you need to step back." "I will not," she yelled. "He's mentally unstable. He's dangerous." The crowd murmured. And then, crack. Metal shrieked. Chains snapped. Melissa's oversized boat lift, illegally reinforced, improperly dismantled earlier that week, collapsed. Her yacht dropped like a stone. The fuel ruptured. Oil spread instantly. Silence fell over the harbor. Melissa stared, frozen. "My boat," she whispered. Environmental officers rushed in. Booms deployed. The irony was almost unbearable. The woman who destroyed my boat over safety concerns had just caused an environmental disaster on camera. An agent turned to her. "Mrs. Crow," he said calmly, "you're under arrest for additional environmental crimes." She didn't resist, she didn't scream, she just sank to her knees as her boat disappeared beneath the water. The festival continued, music resumed, kids laughed. Justice doesn't stop life, it clears the way for it. The final reckoning begins when Melissa faces court, loses everything she tried to control, and the harbor is reborn without fear. The charges become convictions, the marina is officially restored, and the people Melissa tried to silence reclaim the waterfront. She tried to rule with fear. The law ruled back. Melissa Crow didn't look powerful in court. No tailored blazer, no clipboard, no practiced smile. Just wrinkled clothes, pale skin, and eyes that refused to meet anyone else's. I sat 3 rows back, hands folded, listening as the judge read through the charges like a grocery list of consequences. Attempted bribery of a public official, environmental violations, destruction of property, conspiracy to obstruct enforcement. Each count landed heavier than the last. Melissa's attorney, her 3rd one in 2 months, barely spoke. There was nothing left to argue. The recordings were airtight, the environmental damage was documented on camera, the marina ownership records had been verified by the state. Truth has a way of simplifying things. When the judge finally spoke, the room went still. "Miss Crow," he said calmly, "your actions reflect a repeated pattern of abusing authority you did not possess." Melissa swallowed hard. "You used intimidation where you had no jurisdiction. You caused harm, financial, environmental, and personal." I watched her shoulders sag. She wasn't angry anymore. She was empty. The sentence came swiftly. Federal time, heavy fines, and mandatory restitution. 8 months. It wasn't long enough to undo what she'd done, but it was long enough to end her reign. When the gavel fell, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not victory. Relief. The fallout came fast. Melissa's name vanished from the HOA website overnight. The board issued a public apology 2 days later. "We acknowledge misconduct under prior leadership and are cooperating fully with authorities." Translation: they were running for cover. Greg Crow's insurance business didn't survive the investigation. Regulators found years of inflated high-risk waterfront premiums, risk that never existed except the chaos his wife created. Their house went on the market within a month. No buyers at first, not until the price dropped, then dropped again. Meanwhile, the marina changed hands officially. Mine. For the first time since my uncle passed, I walked into the harbor office as the legal operator of Seabrook Marina Holdings. It felt strange, heavy, but right. The first thing I did wasn't raise fees. It was send letters to every waterfront resident. Notices of restructured lease agreements, fair rates, clear rules, actual authority. 8 of the 9 signed within a week. The 9th, Melissa's property. No response. The fishermen were the first to stop by. Cal Russo brought coffee. Pete showed up with his grandson. "You kept us here," Pete said quietly. "She was trying to push us out." I shook my head. "You were never the problem." We prioritized dock access for working boats, long-term leases, protection from harassment. For the first time in years, the harbor felt normal. The environmental restoration followed. Melissa's oil spill triggered state and federal funding for cleanup, irony at its finest. Marine biologists tested water quality weekly. By summer, the shellfish beds were healthier than they'd been in decades. Dr. Leila Moreno, the lead environmental scientist, stood beside me one morning reviewing charts. "Your uncle knew what he was doing," she said. "This marina design actually improves circulation." I smiled. He believed working waterfronts should stay working. I rebuilt the dock. Not just repaired it, rebuilt it. Stronger, safer, compliant. I didn't rebuild my old sailboat, though. Insurance covered the loss, but something inside me had shifted. Instead, I bought a larger vessel with the settlement, a training boat. I named it Second Wind. Every Saturday, kids from the community learned to sail. No yacht club fees, no dress codes, no aesthetic standards, just wind, water, and laughter. It healed something in me I didn't know was still broken. Melissa was transferred to federal custody in early fall. The last thing I heard about her was a letter, handwritten, no return address. It was short. "You ruined my life." I folded it once, then threw it away. She had confused control with worth, authority with identity, and when it vanished, so did she. 6 months passed. The harbor festival doubled in size. Tourists came for the story. Is this where the HOA lady got arrested? Locals laughed. We didn't talk about her much anymore. She didn't matter. The marina did. One evening, as the sun dropped low and the water turned gold, Pete sat beside me on the dock. Do you think this'll happen again? Someone else trying to control what they don't own? I thought about it. Maybe, I said, but not here. Because now the lines were clear, and authority, real authority, was documented. But justice wasn't finished yet, because in Part 6, something unexpected happens. Melissa's property changes hands, the marina's future is secured permanently, and the final irony lands harder than anything before it. The final chapter closes, the harbor's legacy is sealed, and the people Melissa tried to erase become the ones who inherit everything she lost. The ending is poetic and permanent. I didn't hear about Melissa Crow's house selling from the news. I heard it from Pete. He was leaning against a piling, coffee in one hand, squinting out at the harbor like he always did when something felt unreal. "You're not going to believe this," he said. I smiled. "Try me." He took a breath. "The Crow place sold this morning." I nodded slowly. "Investor?" Pete shook his head, grinning now. "The Russo family." I blinked. "Cal Russo?" "The same," he said. "Him and his 2 sons. Closed an hour ago." For a moment, the harbor went quiet. Just wind through rigging, water against wood. The family Melissa tried hardest to push out now owned the biggest house on the waterfront. I laughed. Not loud, not bitter, just a quiet release of something that had been tight in my chest for a long time. Uncle Raymond would have loved that. The transfer didn't take long. Melissa's name vanished from property records the same way it vanished from everyone's conversations, quickly and without ceremony. Her legal troubles dragged on quietly, far away from Seabrook Point. No press conferences, no statements, no last speeches. Power evaporates fast when it was never real to begin with. Greg Crow moved out of state, his business dissolved, his social circle scattered like gulls when a storm rolls in. And just like that, 3 years of intimidation ended without so much as a goodbye. I stood on the marina dock the morning the Russo family moved in. Cal's sons were unloading boxes. One of his grandkids ran past me with a toy sailboat, nearly tripping over a coil of rope. "Careful," I said, laughing. He looked up. "Sorry, sir." Cal walked over, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the water like he was seeing it for the first time. "Never thought I'd live up there," he said quietly. "The water doesn't care who owns the house, just who respects it." He nodded. "That woman never did." The marina flourished that summer, not because of money, because of stability. Clear rules, real authority, no fear. Fishing boats returned, small sailboats appeared again. Families stayed instead of selling under pressure. The HOA still existed, but it stayed where it belonged, on land. The sailing program grew faster than I expected. Second wind was booked every weekend. Kids who'd never stepped on a boat learned how to read the wind, tie lines, trust themselves. One afternoon, a teenage girl stayed behind after a lesson. "My mom said people like us weren't welcome here before," she said softly. I swallowed. "Well," I told her, "she was wrong." In early fall, the court finalized Melissa's restitution order. A portion went to environmental restoration. Another portion covered damages from my destroyed boat. I donated most of it. The rest funded something new, the Raymond Hale Waterfront Trust. Dock maintenance, scholarships for maritime trades, free access days for local families, permanent protections written into the marina's charter, so no one, no HOA president, no developer, no future Melissa could ever pull this again. One evening, Dr. Leela Moreno joined me on the dock. The sun was setting, turning the water copper and gold. "You changed the power structure here," she said. "No," I replied, "I exposed it." She smiled. "That's harder." I still miss my old sailboat. Some nights I can almost hear it, the way the rigging hummed just right when the wind shifted. But loss doesn't always ask to be replaced. Sometimes it asks to be transformed. Second wind wasn't a replacement. It was a continuation. The final update about Melissa came in the mail months later, a standard notice. Sentence completed, restrictions imposed, probation terms enforced. No apology, no explanation, just a line at the bottom that stuck with me. Defendant is prohibited from holding fiduciary authority over any residential association. I folded the paper carefully. That line mattered more than the time she served, because it meant no one else would suffer the way we did. On the anniversary of the Harbor Festival, the town gathered again. Music, food, kids racing dinghies. Pete clinked a bottle against mine. To real authority, he said. To knowing where the lines are, I replied. We watched the water. Free. Sometimes people ask me if it was worth it, letting my boat be destroyed, letting things go so far. I always give the same answer. Yes. Because if I'd stopped her early, she would have disappeared quietly, and someone else would have taken her place. Instead, the truth stood in daylight, documented, permanent. The harbor at dawn sounds different now, not quieter, healthier. Rigging, singing, gulls calling, engines starting for honest work. No threats, no clipboards, no fear dressed up as authority. Just water and people who belong on it. If you're still listening to this story, remember this. Real power doesn't shout. It doesn't intimidate. It doesn't pretend. It shows up on paper. It stands in court, and it protects more than it controls. Melissa Crow tried to rule water she didn't own. In the end, she lost everything, and the people she tried to erase inherited the harbor. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something so solid that no one like them can ever tear it down again.